Hey guys, today in this mechanical explanation video, we're going to take a look at getting the throwing arm into a deep position at front foot strike and some of this mechanical concept's potential benefits. So first off, what does getting the throwing arm into a deep position look like? Let's take a look at a couple pro examples. All right guys, so here I have Jacob deGrom. You can see I have him here from the second base and the catcher view. So let's go ahead and take a little dive in here into what it means to get the throwing arm into a deep position into front foot strike. So here we can see, let's pause deGrom as he gets into front foot strike. So this is usually what we refer to as front foot strike. It's when the front foot connects with the ground and essentially kind of gets a little bit of stabilization there. And that's kind of what we refer to as front foot strike. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So usually what I do with this mechanic to identify if players are getting into a deep position with the throwing arm, and essentially we'll kind of cover what getting deep means here first is, so usually what I do is I will draw a line through the player's center of mass, so somewhere in around here, and on this video we'll just say somewhere in around here, and so that's kind of where the center of their head is, their center of their mass. And ultimately what we're wanting to see here is we're wanting to see what defines getting the throwing arm into a deep position is that the arm is behind the center of mass, meaning more towards their back than that center line. So essentially what do we need here to accomplish this? We need horizontal abduction of the shoulder in the arm, and then we need scapular retraction. And ultimately we can see that deGrom is getting both here. And that's why he's able to get into this deep position. So let's go ahead and draw a line here that will indicate where his throwing arm is. So we can see more or less that's where the center of his hand is. We can clearly see, we'll draw the line over here as well. It's more or less where the center of the hand is. We can clearly see that in both of these views, these are the best views for identifying this mechanic. We can clearly see that the throwing arm on this left side view here is to the left, meaning it's back behind his center line here. And we can clearly see that on this right view, we can see that the arm is on the right of his center line, indicating that it is behind his center of mass. So ultimately, that's what we're looking for here when looking at, is the player getting into a deep position with the throwing arm? Again, horizontal abduction of the shoulders needed here, as well as scapular retraction and just some general pec mobility. Specifically, the pec minor will allow the pec to stretch and allow us to get into this deep position. So here's a great example of a pro that's really, really good at getting into a deep position. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more. All right, guys, our second pro example is going to be Camilo Doval. Again, this is another high 90s to low 100s thrower, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at him in this split screen view. Again, we're on the left, we have him from the second base view, and on the right, we have him from the catcher view. And we'll go ahead and get him paused at front foot strike here in a second and take a look at where his arm is in relation to his center of mass. So we'll get him paused at front foot strike, as we can see here, and we'll go ahead and perform the same exercise we did with Jacob deGrom. And we'll go ahead and draw two lines, one to indicate where his center of mass is, and then one to indicate where his throwing arm is. And we'll see if Camilo is in a deep position with his throwing arm into front foot strike. So we'll start here on the left. We'll draw a line down his center of mass. We'll say it's somewhere in that range. And then we'll draw a line here on his throwing arm. And we can clearly see that he is in a very deep position here with his shoulder horizontally abducted, meaning his arm is well behind his center of mass. And we can clearly see as a result that he's able to get into that deep position we're looking for at front foot strike. So let's go ahead and look from the catcher view here. We'll draw a line down his center of mass, which is somewhere in here. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at where his throwing arm is in relation here. And we can clearly see that his arm is to the right of that center of mass line, meaning that he is in a good horizontally abducted position, meaning that he's in a deep position with the arm there. Now, why is this important? We'll get into this a little more here in a second, but ultimately, the deeper we can get with our throwing arm into front foot strike allows us more time to allow rotational forces to essentially transfer up the kinetic chain and into the throwing arm. So it allows us to allow for that tornado of energy to be sped up for a longer period of time, which is ultimately going to result in more rotational energy being sent into the baseball and to ball release. So we'll go ahead and talk about that a little more, but again, we can see here's another very elite high-level thrower that throws, in the hundreds pretty often, and we can see that he is definitely achieving a deep position with this throwing arm into front foot strike. So let's go ahead and take a look a little further into why this mechanic is so important, and ultimately what some of the things we can do to achieve this mechanic. All right, guys, the first reason getting the arm into a deep position into front foot strike when trying to throw at higher velocities is that it lengthens the distance the arm has to travel into ball release during the arm acceleration phase. Let's take a look at the visual on your screen. On the left, we can see DeGrom's arm is in a deep position behind his center line, while on the right, you can see his arm is about even with his center line. As a result, notice the difference in the distances the arm travels into ball release. As you can see, the arm path on the left that is in green has a longer distance to travel into ball release, which allows more rotational energy that is being transferred up the kinetic chain to be captured by the throwing arm during arm acceleration. On the right, you can see that there is less distance traveled by the arm, which limits the amount of rotational energy that can be captured by the arm during acceleration. By having an understanding of the first advantage of getting deep with the throwing arm, I have been able to lengthen the arm path of numerous players, which has led to velocity increases in all of those players. Another reason getting deep with the throwing arm matters is that it sets the athlete up in a position that promotes leading with their torso and shoulders during the arm acceleration phase. This helps guys that have pushy arm actions where the elbow leads the torso into ball release. I touch on this in another video. Another main benefit of getting the arm deep is that it allows the pec to stretch during the arm acceleration phase. This increases the elasticity of the pec, which can result in a rubber band effect as the pec goes from being in a stretched position during arm acceleration into contraction into ball release. Now that you have an understanding of what getting deep with the throwing arm is and its potential benefits, the last thing I wanted to touch on in this video is some of the mobility requirements in order to achieve a deep position with the throwing arm. Being able to achieve a deep position with the throwing arm is highly dependent on high ranges of mobility in certain areas, so I want to give you guys some pointers on what to work on as far as mobility goes. The first area we need to mobilize are the pecs. For this mechanic specifically, the pec that is closest to your throwing arm. Some mobility exercises you can perform to increase pec mobility are any of our scat pass-through variations, as well as the pec, pails, and rails mobility exercise. Next, to get deep with the throwing arm, we need to increase the tissue quality of the pec. For this mechanic, we specifically want to improve the tissue quality of the pec minor. You can improve tissue quality by performing pec minor myofascial rolling. If you're unfamiliar with myofascial rolling, go ahead and look it up on YouTube. There are tons of great videos out there. Next, you'll want to increase your scapular range of motion. When looking at getting deep, we want to specifically focus on scapular retraction range of motion. You can target scapular retraction range of motion by doing band work or prone tees, Ys, and field goals. Lastly, we want to increase the shoulder's ability to horizontally abduct into deeper ranges. Once again, with this mobility focus, we can target this with band work or prone tees, Ys, and field goals. Also, band pass-throughs are a good option here as well. We hope you guys found this video useful and appreciate you watching. Head over to strokeball.com for more mechanical explanation videos like the one you just watched. Thanks for watching.